It's 1945. The world is engulfed in the chaos of war, and one nation stands on the brink of destruction. Amidst the rubble of a crumbling empire, whispers of a revolutionary aircraft echo through the corridors of power, a jet fighter that could change the tide of battle. Japan, desperate and determined, sets its sights on a daring endeavor, the Nakajima Kikka, a plane inspired by Germany's legendary Me-262. But as the clock ticks down and resources dwindle, a treacherous journey unfolds, one that involves submarines, lost technology, and the ever-looming specter of defeat. Will this ambitious project soar to new heights, or will it crash and burn under the weight of impossibility? Join me as we uncover the riveting tale of ambition, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of survival in the final days of World War II. Today, I want to dive into a groundbreaking milestone in aviation history, the world's first operational combat-ready jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me-262. This aircraft is truly iconic. It's no surprise that Germany was the first to develop an operational jet fighter, considering they also created the first turbojet aircraft, the Heinkel He-178. The He-178 took its maiden flight just days before the onset of World War II, marking the dawn of the jet age even before the war officially began. However, it wasn't until after the war that jet engines became reliable enough for mass production and widespread use. But I'm getting ahead. A few months prior to the He-178's flight, the Luftwaffe and the Reich Air Ministry, recognizing the advancements in jet engine technology, issued a request for a new jet aircraft. This request set the stage for the development of the Me-262, which emerged shortly before World War II erupted. Thus, the journey of the Me-262 began. By 1941, progress on the Me-262 was rather slow. This delay can be attributed in part to the war effort ramping up, as Messerschmitt was busy producing a large number of Bf-109s and Bf-110s, which undoubtedly hindered the development of the Me-262. However, there were more significant factors at play that impeded its progress. These included the extensive research and study required for the aircraft's structure and the development of sufficiently powerful jet engines. One major obstacle came from the intervention of German leadership. Hermann Göring, known for his morphine addiction, diverted research teams and funding away from jet engine development. His reasoning stemmed from the early war belief that Germany could achieve a swift victory using conventional aircraft, rather than investing in what he viewed as future technology that would take years to realize. This meant that aircraft like the Bf-109 and Bf-110 received much more focus and funding. While it's easy to criticize in hindsight, I can understand the logic behind Göring's decision at that time. As a result of this diversion and the slow development of Germany's jet engines, specifically the BMW 003 and Junkers Jumo 004, it wasn't until April 1941 that the Me-262 finally took to the skies for the first time. Interestingly, it did so not with a jet engine, but rather with a single conventional inline piston engine, specifically a Jumo 210, installed in the nose to test the aerodynamic capabilities of the 262's frame. It would take another full year before the Me-262 would finally fly with its intended jet engines. The Me-262, equipped with two Jumo 004 jet engines, would finally take to the skies in July 1942. Over the next couple of years, the aircraft underwent numerous modifications influenced by German leadership before it began production in 1944. However, production was slow due to supply shortages and the inherent challenges of new jet technology. Despite these delays, when the Me-262 finally entered combat, it proved to be an effective aircraft, boasting a top speed of over 500 miles per hour. At some point in the future, we'll likely do a dedicated video on the Me-262. For now, though, let's focus on its initial jet flight in 1942. During this time, Japanese diplomats and military officials were present at several of the Mi-262's early jet engine tests. Witnessing this leap in aircraft technology made a significant impression on them. While Japan had shown interest in jet engine technology prior to this, their experience with the Mi-262 inspired them to develop their own version, complete with a copy of the jet engines produced by Germany. This copycat aircraft is our focus today. Japan's attempt to create a game-changing plane known as the Nakajima Kikka, which translates to orange blossom. I must say, I love some of the Japanese aircraft names. It's quite charming to name a jet fighter after a flower. Anyway, the story of the Kikka begins after the Japanese diplomats witnessed the Mi-262, although its development was a slow burn. Despite sending enthusiastic reports back to the Japanese military about the Mi-262 and its groundbreaking jet engine technology, work on the Kikka didn't commence until over 2 years later. The reason for this gap is unclear, but it likely stemmed from negotiations between Germany and Japan regarding the transfer of data or samples. Given that Germany itself had limited data and constructed models of their jet engines and planes, they were probably reluctant to share their hard-won knowledge with an ally, even though both nations were on the same side. By late 1943 and early 1944, however, Japan sent a team of engineers and researchers to German-occupied France to gather as much German technology and data as they could. This included blueprints for the Mi-262 and the Messerschmitt Mi-163, a rocket interceptor. They aimed to obtain versions of the jet engines, technical data, aircraft parts, and possibly even an entire Mi-163 aircraft. Transporting all of this valuable technology back to Japan proved to be a daunting challenge. Air transport was out of the question due to the volume of materials, while surface transport posed significant dangers. Ground transport was also impractical given the long distances across Allied territory, as it was unlikely the Soviet Union would allow Japan to traverse its lands. Ultimately, the only feasible option was to transport everything via submarine. In early to mid-1944, the Japanese submarine I-29 set off from France on this perilous journey. Miraculously, I-29 reached Japanese-controlled Singapore without incident. However, shortly after departing from Singapore, it encountered Allied forces, was detected, and subsequently sunk, resulting in the loss of all the precious technology and information aboard. Fortunately for Japan, one of the passengers aboard the I-29, a man named H.E. Ha, departed from Singapore separately from the submarine. He carried with him some rudimentary information on the jet engines and aircraft, including personal notes, photographs, and a simple cutaway image of the BMW 003 jet engine. Unlike his companions, he managed to return to Japan safely, and it was from this limited data that Japan would base its own version of the Mi-262. However, there was a notable difference. Japan would be working with limited information about the BMW 03 engine, not the Jumo 004 engine used by the Mi-262. Nevertheless, this challenge was not insurmountable. The real hurdle lay in developing a functioning jet engine in late-war Japan. It's important to remember that Japan had not had great success with inline liquid-cooled engines, so transitioning to jet engines was a significant leap. In September 1944, the Japanese Navy issued specifications to Nakajima for a plane that would essentially be a scaled-down version of the Mi-262. They requested a fighter bomber with a high top speed and a bomb capacity of around 100 pounds. Nakajima responded with a design that closely resembled a smaller, more rudimentary Mi-262, measuring 8.1 meters long, 10 meters wide, and 3 meters tall. The Kikka was shorter by about 2.5 meters in both length and width, and nearly a meter shorter in height. This was not surprising, given that Japanese aircraft were generally smaller, and any engine they would use was likely to be weaker than the Jumo 004, making a smaller and lighter frame preferable. The surfaces of the Kikka's wings and tail mimicked those of the Mi-262, though they were more simplistic. The Mi-262's swept-back wings were modified to feature just a swept leading edge, and the tail surfaces on the Kikka were blockier and more basic. Initially, the Kikka was designed to use the Suisei 11 jet engine, an early and more rudimentary type of jet engine that produced around 440 pounds of thrust. Initially, the Kikka was designed to use the Suisei 11 motor jet engine, which produced around 440 pounds of thrust. However, this was quickly upgraded to the Suisei N2 engine, offering approximately 750 pounds of thrust. It soon became clear that neither engine provided enough power. This prompted a closer examination of the limited data they had on the BMW 003 engine, leading to the development of the Ishikawajima N20. While it was an effective Japanese adaptation of the BMW 003, it was not a perfect replica. The N20 was slightly smaller, lighter, and less powerful, generating just over 1,000 pounds of thrust compared to the 1,300 pounds of thrust from the initial BMW 03 model. Still, the smaller Kikka frame could accommodate this engine, which was adequate for flight. However, on the ground, the situation was more problematic. Early jet engines had slow spool-up times and poor acceleration, requiring either long runways or additional rocket boosters for takeoff. The Kikka opted for the latter, incorporating several rocket boosters to enhance its launch capabilities. The role of the Kikka gradually evolved within the Japanese Navy. Instead of simply serving as a standard fighter or interceptor like the Mi-262, the Kikka was modified to fit Japan's late-war predicament. The design included folding wings, allowing the aircraft to fit into tighter spaces, such as caves, alongside conventional piston-engine planes. This adaptation was meant for surprise attacks and defenses, as the short runways from these locations necessitated the use of rocket boosters. Additionally, late in the war, there was a plan for the Kikka to serve as a kamikaze aircraft. This idea was incredibly flawed, primarily because Japan's resources were already severely limited. Attaching jet engines, expensive to produce and maintain, to a plane designated for such a disposable role seemed counterproductive. However, Japan was desperate, and desperation often leads to unwise decisions. In fact, Japan's resource limitations were so severe that manufacturing the jet engines posed significant challenges. For example, the turbine blades of the N20 lacked the strong metals necessary for durability, requiring replacement every few hours. This meant that if the N20 went into full-scale production, aircraft utilizing this engine would need new turbine blades after each flight. This not only consumed valuable time, but also strained resources at a critical moment in the war. Regardless of these challenges, Japan pressed on with development. Unfortunately, the Kikka's production was hampered by multiple factors. Engineers faced frantic production timelines, with military leadership exerting immense pressure to deliver results. Additionally, the broader wartime situation took its toll. Allied bombers increasingly targeted Japanese towns, cities, and factories, destroying vital resources and delaying production nationwide. An earthquake in late 1944 further complicated Japanese manufacturing efforts, although its direct impact on the Kikka is uncertain. In short, Japan was contending with numerous challenges. By late June 1945, the first prototype Kikka was ready for preliminary testing. After a month of engine spooling for ground trials, the Kikka was finally prepared to take to the skies on August 7, 1945, outfitted with two N20 engines. During the initial test flight of the Kikka, everything surprisingly went quite well. The jet engines operated effectively, and the aircraft reportedly handled smoothly, with no notable issues during the flight that lasted approximately half an hour. The only real concern was the takeoff run, which was considered excessively long, a common issue for early jet-powered aircraft. This characteristic was less a flaw of the Kikka and more a feature typical of jets from that era. The prototype achieved an estimated top speed of 432 miles per hour at a gross weight of 8,995 pounds. Its range was estimated to fall between 127 miles and 586 miles, though I lean toward believing it was closer to the lower end due to the fuel-hungry nature of early jet engines and the Kikka's smaller frame, which limited fuel capacity. Nonetheless, the initial performance of the Kikka was quite promising. 4 days later, it took to the skies again, this time equipped with rocket boosters to assist with takeoff and reduce the lengthy takeoff run. However, this decision, intended to facilitate a quicker ascent, had the opposite effect. When activated, the rockets were mounted in such a way that they propelled the aircraft uncontrollably forward, lifting the nose off the ground momentarily. But as soon as the rockets ceased firing, the nose slammed back down onto the runway. Miraculously, the aircraft remained intact after this chaotic maneuver, but the uncontrolled motion pushed it towards the end of the runway. At that low speed, the pilot had no choice but to attempt to slow the plane down as much as possible, ultimately skidding off the runway and towards the sea, hoping for minimal damage. Fortunately, the aircraft sustained only minor damage, but this incident delayed the project until either the first prototype was repaired or the second prototype was ready. However, fate intervened on August 15, 1945, when the Kikka project abruptly ended. At that time, one prototype was completed, another was nearly finished, and 23 more were in development. It's worth noting the date of the Kikka's first flight, August 7, 1945. A significant event occurred the day before that flight, the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. 3 days later, another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, and 6 days after that, Japan surrendered. By the time the Kikka took to the air on August 7th, the war was essentially over, and Japan's fate was sealed. Yet, they proceeded with the test flight and planned further evaluations. Was it insanity, faith, or pride? Who knows? Regardless, the Kikka project was now effectively dead. But let's entertain a hypothetical scenario. What if the Kikka had entered production at the start of 1945? The intention was for it to serve as Japan's version of the Me-262, a high-speed fighter that Allied aircraft could not match. However, despite being fast for a Japanese fighter, the Kikka's top speed still lagged behind that of iconic planes like the P-51 Mustang. Additionally, it achieved that speed without any armament, apart from a projected bomb load of around 1,000 pounds. To compete effectively in the late stages of World War II, they would have needed to arm it with multiple 12.7mm guns, several 20mm cannons, or perhaps even a 30mm cannon. Adding all these weapons would inevitably increase the aircraft's weight, reducing both its top speed and maneuverability. Therefore, to transform the Kikka into a viable fighter, it would likely not have performed better than existing aircraft in the Allied arsenal. Japan's late-war fighters, like the Shinden, Ki-100, and Ki-84, could have been more effective if they hadn't diverted resources to the Kikka project. Pursuing the Kikka as a kamikaze aircraft would have been incredibly wasteful, akin to WEP, throwing valuable resources into the ocean. In the end, while the fact that the Kikka was developed and took flight is somewhat impressive, given the dire state of the war and the issues surrounding the submarine I-29, the entire Kikka endeavor was likely a major misallocation of time and effort. With that, we'll wrap up today's discussion. Thank you all for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. The story of the I-29 submarine almost reads like something from a war drama, where all hope seems lost until a hero emerges, data in hand, ready to save the day. Picture him emerging from the ocean, soaked but triumphant, clutching a briefcase. If we overlook the ultimate outcome of the Kikka being somewhat pointless, it's an engaging narrative. After all, that's what movies do, take liberties to make a story more captivating. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new.